supremacy the battle cruiser HMS Hood. At 42,000 tons with 8 15-inch guns, the Hood is considered the most powerful warship in the world. At 32 knots, she is also among the fastest. HMS Hood is the embodiment of British sea power, an imperial status symbol. Aboard the Hood, in command of the British Strike Force, is Vice Admiral James Somerville. He anchors his flotilla at Gibraltar and prepares to send his emissary, Cedric Holland, to reason with the French Admiral, Marcel Gensoul. In a final briefing to his officers aboard the Hood, Somerville is grave. "I am ordered to inform the French. They must either bring their ships to British harbors and fight with us, steam with reduced crews through a British port and demilitarize their ships immediately, or scuttle them. Should the French be unwilling, we must then destroy the French ships." For 2 days, Holland travels back and forth between Gensoul and Somerville. The admiral is immovable. If he accepts any of the British options, he will betray his word to the Germans and France will be punished. And so shortly after noon on July 3, 1940, the Hood trains her guns on the port of Mirs el Kabir, where 4 French battleships and a collection of auxiliary vessels lie defiantly at anchor. France and England have not fired a shot at each other in 125 years. The British battleships open fire. In just 10 minutes, 3 French battleships and a destroyer are out of commission. Churchill has called it the deadly stroke. When it is over, 1,290 men of the French Navy are dead. 1,000 more have been wounded. The French admiral presides over the mass burial. He says, "If there is a stain on the flag, it is certainly not on ours." Aboard the Hood, Admiral Somerville writes to his wife, "We all feel thoroughly dirty and ashamed. I think it was the biggest political blunder of modern times." The action of the British squadron that summer of 1940 remains a controversy, but at the time, the symbolism was clear.
Churchill was determined to demonstrate to the United States that Britain was serious about staying in the war. Britain was not going to do a France, and therefore Britain was worthy of American support.
Control of the Mediterranean was an essential element of the British war plan in 1940. On 11 November, just 4 months after the attack on Mirs el Kabir, the British carrier Illustrious maneuvers into position. For the first time in naval history, the British will attempt a surprise attack by carrier-based aircraft against an enemy naval base. Their target, the Italian port of Taranto. Their bombs and torpedoes wreak havoc on the ships of Mussolini's fleet. John Neal of the Fleet Air Arm was in the first wave of planes.
We were absolutely cock-a-hoop. We really were, because we saw at once that we had reduced the Italian fleet to on a par, or perhaps even less than our own fleet. So no longer were they really an immediate danger to us in the Mediterranean. We also felt that we had put one in the eye of the battleship boys, shall I call them, or the big ship gunners, who in effect ruled the Navy in those days.
Word of the mission's unqualified success catches the attention of the top-ranking officer in the United States Navy, Admiral Harold Stark. He is concerned that what happened to the Italian fleet at Taranto could easily happen to the American fleet secluded in Pearl Harbor. Admiral Stark sounds the alarm, which goes largely unheeded in Washington. But not in Tokyo. On hearing the news from Taranto, the commander-in-chief of Japan's combined fleet, Admiral Yamamoto, turns to his chief of staff and says, "An air attack on Pearl Harbor might be possible now, especially as our air training has turned out so successfully." spring 1941. The Japanese continue their aggression in Indochina and sign a war pact with Germany. Most of Europe is under the Nazi boot. Hitler is pleased with his new Japanese ally as he presides over the launch of Germany's newest, most formidable weapon, the battleship Bismarck. The ship is referred to as he, in deference both to its namesake, the great Prussian Chancellor, and the masculine warrior tasks for which it was created. On one speed trial in the Baltic, he reaches 30.8 knots. The ship boasts 8 15-inch guns and a sophisticated fire control system. Bismarck's armor consumes 40% of the ship's weight. The battleship is the perfect symbol for the Third Reich. And yet, Bismarck is far too valuable to place in harm's way. Its mission is to hunt enemy merchant ships, as do the other German raiders. On May 19, 1941, Bismarck steams to sea on its maiden voyage. Even before Hitler learns of its departure, the British are tracking Bismarck's progress. 4 days later, the battleship is located by the superior radar of the heavy cruiser Suffolk. Now the Royal Navy knows Bismarck is on the move, racing for the North Atlantic. HMS Hood and Prince of Wales are dispatched to intercept. By 5:45 on the morning of 24 May, the Hood and Prince of Wales have closed within 13 miles of Bismarck. Hood fires first. Bismarck immediately returns fire. The first shells strike the Hood's fused torpedoes at midships, and she explodes.
The battle was over in a matter of minutes. Hood blew in two, a huge explosion, witnessed in horror from Prince of Wales. Hood's going at 28 knots, the stern section virtually drove herself into the sea, and the bow section canted up. A final salvo was seen being fired from the foremost guns uselessly into the sky. In a few seconds, Hood was gone.
Of the ship's total company of 1,419, 3 survivors cling to life rafts in the icy water. Only one, signalman Ted Briggs, is alive today.
I felt myself being dragged down, and I was trying to get away. And the next thing I knew was I suddenly seemed to shoot to the surface. When I came up, there wasn't another soul inside. I looked around, and she was about 50 yards away, and she was vertical with the water. And the B turret was just going under. I panicked, and I turned and swam as fast as I could away from her. And when I looked around again, she'd gone. Those on the upper deck, a lot were killed and wounded before she went. And the others, I suppose, were just taken care of by suction. But only 3 of us came up. She was a beautiful, proud ship, but unfortunately, with a glass jaw.
HMS Hood's glass jaw was a function of her design. Armor had been sacrificed for speed. The next day, the victorious Bismarck, a hole in its bow from a shell fired from Prince of Wales, is short on fuel and heads directly for France.
The Royal Navy had been utterly shocked at the loss of Hood. Ships right across the Atlantic converged towards the likely area of Bismarck, in some cases without orders. They had to find Bismarck. They were going to sink that ship, one way or another.
26 May 1941, 10:30 a.m. A Catalina flying boat dives through the clouds for a better look at a huge ship below. It is met with a hail of gunfire from the Bismarck, trailing oil at 20 knots, less than 12 hours from freedom in France. But only 50 miles away is the British carrier Ark Royal. Within minutes, 15 of the Ark Royal's swordfish are in the air. Most of their torpedoes will miss, but one jams the Bismarck's rudder and plants the seeds of its destruction. Royal Navy battleships will finish the job.
Bismarck died under very severe bombardment, was shot to pieces at close range. It was very bloody, and nearly 2,000 men died.